Today's big story, we are taking a deep dive into former U.S. Attorney Kenyen Brown's report into the Mobile Police Department's policies and procedures. Brown's report looked into 6 violent incidents involving the police department within the past 9 months, 4 of which were deadly. The report says all 4 of the deadly encounters were justified but preventable. WKRG News 5's Asher Red is following this story. The report also says there is a problematic MPD culture, and it starts with leadership. Asher.
Yeah, Cherish, and of the 6 cases that Brown reviewed, the 2 non-fatal incidents were caught on camera. Now let's break it down case by case.
I think some work needs to be done on that. I had some concerns about some of the practices.
Former U.S. Attorney Kenyen Brown investigated the Mobile Police Department's policies and procedures in the wake of 6 violent encounters with Mobile Police over the span of 8 months. The first case in Brown's report was a pre-dawn SWAT raid that left 16-year-old Randall Ajesum dead. Brown says the officer's use of deadly force in this case is justified, as Ajesum allegedly had a laser-sighted handgun pointed at officers. The report says that MPD used its SWAT team even though it was not required.
There was a shortage of narcotics personnel to execute a search warrant on a house this size. The most aggressive tool in your toolbox, and you use it because you have a manpower shortage.
The second case was caught on cell phone video. A citizen captured a video showing an officer body slamming a 16-year-old girl outside Excel Academy. There's no police video of the incident.
The body-worn camera of the officer we discovered was not turned on when it should have been.
Brown is quick to say that it appears the officer's use of force in this case was excessive.
The size of the officer, the force at which he using that particular technique, we thought was excessive.
The third case involves the death of Jawan Dallas, who died shortly after being tased multiple times by officers. Brown's review of Dallas's death was the longest, spanning 17 pages. The officer's use of force, according to Brown, is justified as Dallas reached for the officer's tasers and resisted arrest. But what happened after Dallas was detained troubled Brown and his team.
He was told by officers 5 times, "Shut the F up."
Brown says Dallas then tried to reposition himself as he complained of having a medical emergency.
And the attending MPD officer who we had just wrestled with said, "Move again and I'm going to hit you in your MFing stomach."
Then an officer allegedly made a sarcastic comment to a bystander when they had told officers to check on Dallas's condition.
Unfortunately, this officer then gets into a verbal altercation with the bystander and tells him, well, bring your ASS over here and we'll whoop you too.
Brown says profanity is not taught in MPD training and it only accelerates a situation. The fourth case involves the beating of Beezer DuBose Jr., which was also caught on camera. After a traffic stop, DuBose and the arresting officer, Paul Caligari Jr., got into a fight. Caligari is seen on DuBose's back beating him with closed fists. Overall, Brown calls this excessive force. After the fight, Caligari tried to justify his actions by claiming DuBose was grabbing his private areas, but Brown disputes that.
The officer did not go to medical on that occasion, but rather waited 3 days after the event had been posted on social media. The officer complained several times about his thumb being injured. However, he did not complain a single time about any pain in his groin area.
The fifth case was the officer-involved shooting that killed Christopher Jones. Neighbors called police in regards to a man sleeping on the roof of a house on Glenwood Street. Jones came down from the roof after officers cussed him out and pulled tasers out to entice him to come down. Brown says the officer's use of deadly force was justified as Jones pulled a gun on the officers. However, he says this could have been prevented.
The Mobile Police Department had been called out to that same address a week prior. For the same reason, related to the same person. However, MPD dispatch did not share those facts with the officers that were responding to the call.
Even more, DuBose was known to have mental health issues, which Brown says could have played a role in how officers responded.
How they handled that situation was exactly the opposite of how MPD training guided them.
The last case that Brown reviewed involved a pre-dawn raid that killed Cordell Jones. Brown says the officer's use of deadly force is justified as Jones was seen escaping the home with a firearm. However, Brown says problems arrive in MPD's handling with Jones's family.
MPD, in our view, improperly and unconstitutionally transported those family members.
Brown says Jones's family members were then taken to MPD headquarters, held there, and not read their Miranda rights. He says Jones's death could have been avoided had MPD raided at a different time of day.
Now, all of that is what we were able to pull out of the cases that Brown reviewed, but there's still a lot we may never know. Coming up at 5 o'clock, we'll talk about why more than 16% of Brown's report is redacted, just like this page. Live in the studio for now, I'm Asher Red, WKRG News 5.